Let's look at how to complete a dihybrid cross. This presentation is based on a handout that you should have with you called Dihybrid Cross Step-by-Step Instructions. It's exactly what it is. It's going to tell you step by step how to do these relatively complicated problems. You should have it out because I'm occasionally going to pause and ask you to get extra practice. This is an optional assignment, but nonetheless it prepares you for the required assignment, which is going to be problems where you're required to do an entire dihybrid cross from beginning to end. To start, let's remind ourselves what a monohybrid cross is. That's where we're looking at one gene. For example, in pea plants, height is controlled by one gene, and there are just two phenotypes. A plant can either be tall or it can be short. If you know the genotypes of the parents, that's when you can do a Punnett square to determine the probabilities of the offspring having either of these two phenotypes. Likewise, in pea plants, the color of the flowers is controlled by just one gene. There are just two phenotypes. The plant can either have purple flowers or white flowers. And again, if you know the genotypes of the parents, that's when you can use a Punnett square to determine the probabilities of the offspring having either of these two flower colors. In a dihybrid cross, we're looking at two genes together, for example, height and flower color. We're no longer considering height by itself or flower color by itself. Our phenotypes are now tall with purple flowers, tall with white flowers, short with purple flowers, and short with white flowers. So we now have 4 possible phenotypes, not just 2. Looking ahead, this is what your Punnett square is going to look like. 16 squares instead of just the 4 that you're used to. So the key to solving this, they're not difficult, but you definitely need to just be neat and methodical, or by the end of the problem, you're going to end up with a mess. Pause here if you need to review the meanings of the terms in a Punnett square. So here's a typical dihybrid cross problem. First, you're reminded that in pea plants, tall is dominant over short, and purple flowers is dominant over white flowers. Then you're going to be given the genotypes of the parents. In this case, one parent is heterozygous for height and heterozygous for flower color, and the other parent is short and has white flowers. Then, finally, you're going to be asked for each of these phenotypes, what is the probability? So now I'm going to walk you through a step-by-step procedure for completing these problems. All right, so there's going to be 4 steps. Step 1, determine the parents' genotypes. Now it's really just translating the description of the parents that you just saw into the letters. Let's practice. So suppose you were told a parent is homozygous dominant for height and has white flowers. What are you going to write down for the genotype of this parent? Homozygous dominant for height. What is that going to be? Remember, you're using big T's and little t's for height and big C's and little c's for flowers. All right, so homozygous dominant for height, big T, of course. How about white flowers? What's the only genotype? Again, using big C's, little c's. What's the only genotype that is going to produce this recessive trait of white flowers? Little c, right? Next one, B, heterozygous for height and heterozygous for flower color. Well, that's easy. What are you going to write down? Heterozygous for height, big T, and heterozygous for flower color, big C, little c. That's easy. How about short and homozygous dominant for flower color? Well, what is the only genotype that is going to give you a short plant? Of course, that's little t. And homozygous dominant for flower color, that's, of course, big C. All right, so jump on over if you need the practice to do more of those if you feel like you need the practice. Again, I'm providing you with the solutions to this too. Step 2, determine the gametes for each parent. Now, some people struggle with this first, but it turns out to be really easy. You're going to be using the genotypes of the parents to figure out what to put here for the gametes. You're essentially going to be doing FOIL, like in math. Just watch closely what I do here, and you're going to get it. I'm starting with the first T and the first C. Write it down. And then the first T and the second C. Write it down. Big T, little c. Now I move to the second T with the first C. Write it down. And the second T with the second C. Write it down. Did you follow that? Let's do one more. We'll do the one over here. So once again, first T with the first C, write it down. First T with the second C, write it down. Now I move to that second T, combine it with the first C, write it down, second T with the second C, write it down. That makes sense? All right, so there's more practice for you here. This one you really might want to get some more practice, right? And again, I'm going to provide you the solutions to this, but here you have plenty of practice, and this also describes what you do, and you have a little graphic here. All right, so that's pretty straightforward, right? You can do that. Step 3 is just to complete your Punnett square. It's really easy. You've got your alleles here, and you're just combining what's in this egg with what's in this sperm. You're going to write it right here in this box. You only have 2 rules to follow. Number 1, keep your T's together and your C's together. And rule number 2 is always capital letter first, right? So if you're doing your T's first, what are you going to put there? Big T, little t, and your C's then, big C, right? How about the next one? Big T, little t, and then combine your C's there. What are you going to do? Big C, little c, right? What's this next one here? Little t, big C, see, that really is easy, right? I mean, if you need more practice, there's more of it down here. Otherwise, just move on. And finally, step 4, determine the probabilities of the phenotypes. So this was the problem statement that you were given in the very beginning. You're asked a question like, determine the probability that an offspring will be tall with purple flowers. Now, this is a complicated, you got to be methodical here. Here's what you have to do. Choose one gene, the first one here, for example, tall, and then don't even think about the color of the flowers now. Just identify which of these are tall. And which ones are tall? Any of them that are big T, or any that are big T, little t. And highlight them or circle them, somehow identify them. Now think about flower color. Of these tall plants, which of them are purple flowers? Which ones are purple? Any of the ones that are big C or big C, little c. Highlight them or circle them, count them up. So now you know that on average, 9 out of every 16 plants are going to be tall with purple flowers. Now you're asked to give the probability as a percent, so you just divide 9 by 16, multiply by 100, round to the nearest percent, and you're going to get 56%. All right, another problem. Probability that an offspring will be tall with white flowers. Well, among those tall plants, how many are white? 3. So 3 out of 16, every 3 out of 16 flowers, or every plants, are going to be tall with white flowers. Again, doing the we'll divide 3 by 16 times 100, round to the nearest percent, you're going to get 19%. And that is it. That is how you do a dihybrid cross problem. All right, I need to tell you one last thing before you go off to do your problem where you're solving entire dihybrid cross problems. And if you listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you, you will be able to avoid a lot of work on one of those problems. All right, so did I get your attention? This particular example is sort of a classic dihybrid cross where each of the genotypes is heterozygous for both parents. So heterozygous, 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 heterozygous. If that's the case, then you will always get this phenotypic ratio of 9 to 3 to 3 to 1. 9 of the 16, on average, 9 of the 16 offspring will have both of their phenotypes will be the dominant phenotypes. 3 out of the 16 will have one of the dominant phenotypes and one of the recessive phenotypes. And then just one of the 16 will have both of the recessive phenotypes, like in this case, where only 1 out of the 16 is short with white flowers. Why is this significant to you? Because if you are given a dihybrid cross problem and you happen to notice that both of the parents have both of their genotypes are heterozygous, you don't have to do a Punnett square. You can jump straight to where they ask you for probabilities, and if they ask you what is the probability an offspring will have both of the dominant phenotypes, you can just jump right to 9 out of 16, do your division, and report the probabilities. All right, so now you can go and do your problem set. Good for you. You made it. Bye-bye.